My name is Angie Peacock. I'm a psychiatric drug withdrawal consultant and a healing coach. I support people who are coming off antidepressants, benzodiazepines, and antipsychotics. I like to bring you conversations that are important to me, things that I'm curious about, things that I'm interested in, and things that apply to people that are deprescribing. So today I'm so excited to bring you a conversation with Adele Framer. I look up to her like so much. She formed Surviving Antidepressants. She's like the coolest lay scientist that I can think of, that I know of. And believe it or not, I first posted on Surviving Antidepressants in 2014. I had to go back and look. And it was a question about, I put the Cymbalta beads in my mouth instead of a capsule. Am I going to be okay? And I don't even remember posting it or anything, but I did find it just in time for this interview. So let me welcome Adele. Adele, thank you for doing this. Welcome.
Thank you for that gracious introduction, Angie.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm so fond of you. All right, so let me read her very short bio just to get you an introduction to who we're speaking with today in case you've never heard of her or her work. It's amazing, so we'll get to it. But Adele Framer is a patient advocate, and she's a lay expert in psychiatric drug tapering and withdrawal, having studied it since her own experience with antidepressant withdrawal syndrome in 2004. She founded a leading support group website in 2011, offering peer support for tapering, and in 2021 published a well-received paper in Therapeutic Advances in Psychopharmacology that has been viewed more than 128,000 times. She co-authored another about protracted withdrawal syndrome, which has been viewed nearly 41,000 times since its publication in 2020. She has been interviewed by the New Yorker, The Economist, and the BBC Panorama program. Welcome. That's so impressive what you've done with your own suffering. Honestly, that's where it came from, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a road, and I am very grateful to see that some of the information is getting out there.
Let's get in there. So let's get right to it. I have tons of questions for you. Just for people that don't know you, maybe have never heard of you, they're brand new to the antidepressants world coming off. Tell us, like, how did you come to be on an antidepressant? How did you come off? And how did surviving antidepressants begin?
Well, my story is sort of an age-old story, but it's still happening. So in 2004, I was working, and it was a period that's probably a lot like this, where there were a lot of changes in the economy, and my company was kind of unstable, and I was experiencing a lot of stress, and I probably also was on the brink of menopause then. And so I went to my doctor, my GP, and I said, I'm really having some problems here. And she said, well, I'll give you an antidepressant. They're all the same. Here's a prescription for Paxil. So she prescribed me Paxil, and I started taking it, and it did, in fact, dull my anxiety, and it also eliminated my sexual response, as these things do. And over a couple of years, I began to feel like it was making me duller and duller and duller. Emotionally, it got to the point where I was feeling extremely demotivated, and I thought that it might be a good idea to stop. So I went to a psychiatrist, because I thought that a psychiatrist would be a good an expert, and I told him that what was going on, and he said, well, I'll give you Lexapro. So he switched, and I said, how do I change from Paxil to Lexapro? And he said, well, you just stop taking Paxil, and then you take Lexapro. And then after that, I got so I followed his instructions, and I of course got terrible withdrawal from Paxil shortly after starting taking Lexapro. And then when the Lexapro kicked in, it was too strong for me, and I had like a horrible reaction to that as well. So I went back and I begged him to give me a Paxil prescription again, and he threw me out of his office. So because something bad had happened and he didn't want to deal with it, and I had to beg him for a Paxil prescription from the doorway. So I started taking Paxil again, and then it didn't the problems that I was having with it didn't get any better. And so I went to a university outpatient clinic, a psychiatry outpatient clinic that I thought was staffed by experts, and I asked them how to go off. And they said, well, you just go off over a few weeks. You can find out on the web how to do it. So, so I looked up something and it probably said take half and then half again and then go off. And of course, I got violent withdrawal symptoms. My initial withdrawal symptoms were hypomania, which when you're feeling hypomanic, you don't really worry about how weird it is. So
Right.
anyway, so I was hypomanic for 4 or 6 weeks, and then I went into like really, classic withdrawal. And the clinic, the psychiatry clinic, had no idea what was going on with me. And at one point, and at that point, it was in 2004, I started researching with, the web was fairly primitive then.
Mhm.
The resources aren't what we have now, but I did a lot of hunting, and I found some papers about paroxetine withdrawal syndrome. And I went back and I said to them, this is what I've got. Can I have some paroxetine again? And they said no. They said, here, have some Cymbalta. Cymbalta was
Just coming out.
yeah, Cymbalta was being advertised then. So they said, here, have some, what you want is Cymbalta or whatever. And so that was just a really terrible experience. And so I had continued to have withdrawal symptoms for quite a while.
Mhm.
And I struggled along with them for several years. They started to get a little better, and I was still working, but I changed jobs, and I took a more stressful job, which was a terrible mistake, and I stopped sleeping. So then there was a cascade of worse symptoms occurred, and eventually it took me, and I hope that this isn't terribly frightening to everyone, but it took me 11 years to recover.
Mhm.
So in that period, I had to stop working, and I went on disability, and but I continued to research this topic. So at that point, this was in 2011. So this is 7 years after I went off of paroxetine, and I was still having difficulty with protracted withdrawal. I started survivingantidepressants.org in 2011 with some people who had been on another withdrawal website. At that time, there were probably a half a dozen or 10 of them on the web. And so we started survivingantidepressants.org in more or less the form that it is now. And because we had all had experience with this before, I wanted to design the site so that we could gather cases, the patient accounts of their experiences, in order to educate doctors about the problems. And that became the basis of the 2 papers that I published on therapeutic advances of psychopharmacology, and also several other papers that other people have written.
Mhm. And tell people how it's organized. Like, what do people that don't know anything about it, like, what is it like? Like, I don't know, explain it. Yeah.
It's a very primitive form of social media called it's called a forum site. And what we do is we ask people to join. When they first join, we ask them to start a topic in the introductions forum and explain their situations and something of their drug history. So that forms the basis for the cases that we collect. And I have about a dozen moderators who assist, and these are experienced community members who've learned a tremendous amount about tapering and withdrawal symptoms. And altogether, since 2011, we've accumulated 20,000 members. But at any one time, there's only about 300 people active. Another part of the site is a collection of articles about how to taper specific drugs. And it covers all the major antidepressants, the antipsychotics, and other types of drugs such as lamotrigine, et cetera. So so we try to, and that part of the tapering section is public. So anybody can peek in from the web and read those articles. And we have, millions of visitors a year who I hope, read the articles and then learn something about tapering and have, I hope, better experiences going off of their drugs.
Yes. And the most valuable thing to me from there is your guides. It'll say like how to taper effects, here's some tips, and like here how do you weigh a pill and how to use a scale, reinstatement and updosing. What does that mean? What are the risks and benefits of that? Like, I really like it the way it's organized. It's very easy to read. It's all right there. People can gather the information that their doctor's not giving them. So it's super valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have topics on these, these different these different areas of interest. So trying to, I mean, we did it ourselves, so we know what people, we hope we understand what people need to know.
Exactly. So this brings up a really interesting topic to me. Just like, you're a lay scientist, basically. You're a lay researcher. You're not a doctor. You're not a medical research, anything like that. But the fact of the matter is the knowledge base for tapering antidepressants and other psychiatric drugs is coming from the patients who take them and who have to have the experience of coming off. What can you say about that? Like, how the power shift is different? Like, it's not coming from the medical industry, it's coming from us.
I think that this is, I don't know how well known it is, but I think this is a really new thing in improving medical care that's coming from the patients. And I think that now this is how many years are we? We're how many years are we?
It's 14 years.
Yeah. Okay. So we're yeah, so now there's a huge network of people interested in the problems of psychiatric drug withdrawal, and not to mention all the patients that are involved in it. And it's just become a real, I think we really have made a dent in the general understanding. I think that people now really do know, in general, I'd say the general public gets it, that they might get withdrawal symptoms if they go off their drugs too fast. I think that that's pretty well known now. I think that we encourage people to use a 10% gradual tapering method, and I think that has become very well known, especially since there are now dozens of Facebook groups for tapering, and they all pretty much use that method. So the general outlines of gradual tapering have become known, and this is a new thing. This is something that was not in place in 2011, and certainly didn't come from from your institutional or conventional psychiatry. Didn't tell people to do this. It came from the patients, and I would say that also in the last 5 years or so, there have become medical researchers such as Dr. Horowitz, who have done a tremendous amount of work in this area. So right now, so what's been created is a body of knowledge published in medical journals, which is considered to be like the official source for this kind of thing, about withdrawal and tapering, but much of the original information comes from patients.
I think it's pretty revolutionary, even for me when I got in this world, because I was going through it. I was like, what do you mean there's no doctor that understands this? What do you mean? I don't understand. Like, what you go on an online forum and you get information that's better than what your doctor is giving you. Like it took me a minute to understand that, but it's like, wait, these people are telling me the truth and the doctor doesn't quite know. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's a shock to everybody. It was a shock to me back in 2005 when I first joined an online forum. It's a shock to everyone that this seems so obvious, but their doctor doesn't know anything about it. But that's
what's happening. So with you publishing papers about helping people for years go through antidepressant withdrawal, and this online forum and other pieces that you've been interviewed for, have you experienced any pushback, or what have you seen?
No, I think that a pushback, well, first of all, it's still real difficult to communicate to, let's say, medical associations or just doctors in general what the problem is. It's still difficult, but I haven't personally gotten any, I haven't been like personally dismissed. I think that the fact that something is published in a medical journal is it acquires its own it's kind of a
Like a
it's
legitimacy. It gives
yes,
it
right, because
yeah.
it becomes legitimate. Pushback, I would say the pushback is that let's say in 2004, when I went off of Paxil, nobody knew anything about withdrawal. Then in 2011, which was 7 years later, and when I founded Surviving Antidepressants, I think that the general position among doctors was that withdrawal exists, but it only affects a tiny number of people. It's extremely rare. And for most people, it's going to be mild and just really
Self-limiting.
important. Yeah. So they didn't bother to learn anything about it. And I would say that now I think it's starting to dawn on them that it might be a big deal. And one of the things that's happened is that there's a lot of interest now in psychedelics, for therapeutic psychedelics. Well, one of the things that's happened is that those researchers have found that what they consider to be effective psychedelic therapy is inhibited by people taking antidepressants, and they found that when people go off of antidepressants, the withdrawal symptoms also interfere with the psychedelic therapy. So those, so they're trying to develop a new mode of treatment, and they're finding that the withdrawal problems are a barrier to converting people to psychedelic therapy. Now, I'm just mentioning this as a trend in research. I'm not saying that I don't know anything about psychedelic therapy, and I'm not recommending it because I don't know anything about it.
Right. Yeah. So that just begs the question about cognitive dissonance, because I know I experienced that doing film screenings with Medicating Normal. There's two kinds. It's coming from the medical side, but also from the patient side. And I was one of them. Even before I went through withdrawal, I was like, meds help me. They're saving my life. What do you mean? No. There's just like this wall that goes up. It's such a touchy subject, just in general. Like, people don't want to believe, the meds hurt them. Or I've met clients that I have, that they said, I came off Prozac the first time, I was fine. Nothing happened. I was one of the people that said, now the second time I got burned. So how do you navigate like the cognitive dissonance? Or you might not experience it because everybody's coming to you willingly, but I guess, what are your comments about cognitive dissonance and just in the medical field in general?
I encounter it all the time. Yes, right. People who are taking psychiatric drugs cannot believe how hard it is to come off. They can't believe it. They don't want to believe it. They want to think that they can go faster. Many people who arrive at my website who tried to go off think that there was something really unusual about their difficulty. They think, they often say, am I the only one who's had this problem? No, we have 20,000 people who've had this problem, and hundreds of thousands more on Facebook, and millions all over the place probably. And so everyone thinks that starts out thinking that they're having an unusual problem, and they come to realize that this is kind of like a gigantic oopsie in medicine. So that the doctors know how to get you started on the drugs, but they don't know how to get you off the drugs. And it's very hard for people. I think one part of the difficulty is that everybody wants to believe in their doctors, and this is true of me too. It was very, very hard for me to accept it, that there are some things that my doctor just wouldn't know. So that's real hard for people because they want to think that there's a safety net, that they can go to their doc, if something goes, if they feel really bad, that they go to the doctor and the doctor will know what to do, or the doctor will be able to send them someplace where somebody knows what to do. But unfortunately, in this situation, it's really hard to find a doctor who knows anything about tapering or withdrawal.
Yeah.
And really hard, and it's better than it used to be. So but it's still really hard. So I think that's from the patient side. There's a lot of that kind of cognitive dissonance. It's really scary to think that you just really don't have that kind of safety net. And the closer you look at it, the more you realize that if you're in general good health, you can maintain that idea that there's a safety net. But when something goes wrong, you realize how complicated medicine really is, and how many gaps there are, because there are, for like very well-known medical problems such as heart conditions, there are different opinions, there are different techniques, there's different, doctors treat them different ways, and you have to figure out which is the best way. So it's not, so medicine isn't as reliable as we want to think it is, unfortunately. But and then on the doctor's side, first of all, GPs are doing most of the prescribing of psychiatric drugs in the form of antidepressants. And also in the United States, they dabble in every other kind of drug as well. So the GPs are not, it's not their specialty, and they have a lot of other things that they need to get to. So if you're having a problem with your psychiatric drug, your GP is probably, doesn't really have a lot of time to figure it out. And so I would say the GPs in general don't want to think that there's going to be some complications. So there's that, I could just say, that cognitive dissonance when they get presented with this idea that, like, a lot of people are having trouble going off of their antidepressants, and they want to think that, well, it's not my patients, so it's not something I need to worry about. It's happening somewhere else, but in fact, it's like every doctor is responsible for this.
Yes.
So every one of them thinks that it's not their problem, but it's all of their problem. So and then a lot of times, because the people on my website have tried to go off their drugs before and had problems, and a lot of them do see psychiatrists, and sometimes they see multiple psychiatrists, and they're not getting any better advice from them either. No. So the psychiatrists, it's hard to lump a group of tens of thousands of people together, but I would say that they really don't think that this is a central problem for them. So it's kind of like, maybe somebody else should take care of this. Mistakes were made, but not by me. It's a definite, like, oh yeah, somebody should look into this, but I don't have time to look into this. And every paper that mentions withdrawal symptoms, at the bottom it says this deserves further study,
further research. We call that the academic out. It's like, we don't have all the answers, but there should be someone looking into that.
Yeah, somebody should look into this more, but I'm tired of it. So
yeah, I touched on it.
Yeah,
continue someone else. Yes.
So,
okay, so that go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that everything does need further study. It's like you never get to the last word, really.
No.
But yeah, so I think they just don't want to. It's the way that I look at it is that traditionally medical training never did contain a lot about how to deal with adverse drug effects. Never. Traditionally, doctors would, let's say, prescribe antibiotics, and the idea was that, antibiotics can cause adverse reactions, but you take them for a short amount of time. You want to kill a bug, you get in there, you kill a bug. Maybe the patient is, has nausea for, 5 days, but you stop that, and then they that's the end of that problem, right? So they're
Right.
not that concerned with the adverse effect of the drug. But now we're in the psychotropic era, where so many people are being prescribed psychotropics. And so many of the psychotropics have pretty hairy adverse effects. But the doctors are kind of looking at it the same way, is that, well, those adverse effects have got to be worth the price of your treatment.
Yeah.
But the treatment is endless. So it's they're applying that same risk benefit thinking as they do to antibiotics, but it's not the same situation and it's not the same risk benefit. The fact is that if you're signed up to take an antidepressant for 3 years, you don't want to be miserable for that 3 years. That's the that's not the antidepressant is supposed to improve your quality of life, not make you miserable for 3 years. It's not like it's not like it's going over the 3 years it's going to be killing a microbe. It's a
Mind altering substance.
it's a lifestyle. So you want to so people really people should be able to tolerate their lives on psychiatric drugs, but if they don't, the doctors don't know what to do, and that goes triple, of course, for the withdrawal problems and the post-withdrawal problems. So it's like it's just really not in medical training.
Yeah. I recently heard, I don't know if you know Vinay Prasad, but he's at UCSF, I think, or Stanford, one of those. But he's an oncologist who studies medical reversal. So like we think this is great, but oopsie, it's not, And I was really upset because one of his panel discussions, he was talking to some other doctors and they were talking about continuing medical education. And they were saying, don't treat us like that. We don't need continuing medical education. We're not stupid. We don't have time for this. Most of us don't put it into practice. Like, it's a waste of our time. It's a waste of your time. Let it go. And I'm just like, okay, if we can't get to them in medical education, like in the curricula, and we can't get to them in CME, and we can't get to them from patient accounts, like this is never going to change. I just don't see any other avenue, legislation, and that's not going to happen either.
Actually, a psychiatrist, I asked a psychiatrist that question, which is like, how do we reach them? Yeah. And she said, you know what? They read Psychology Today.
No way. You got to be kidding. Christopher Lane. Okay, they're reading Christopher Lane. No, I know he's got a lot of good articles.
Psychology Today has, like lots of columnists, but they basically get their information from pop medicine.
Wow.
Like everybody else.
Fascinating. And Twitter, maybe Twitter.
Well, yeah, you can see what they're doing on Twitter, but I think a lot of them don't have time for Twitter. But no. I believe that they chat with their colleagues, they get information. But there's a lot of folklore in medicine, and it's passed by word of mouth. So that like they'll talk to they'll run into their colleague at dinner or something in a restaurant. They'll say, like, hey, what are you doing for your patient who's taking an SSRI with sexual dysfunction? Another guy will say, just
pick them off.
Yeah. Add in Wellbutrin works like a charm. So that's like, that's how it's well, that's a pretty well-known kludge for sexual dysfunction. My belief is that the antidepressant should be reduced, but medicine being what it is, it's like like add another drug. So they like trade recipes. They trade cocktail recipes, and
Jesus.
That's how.
Well, speaking of that, okay, so this all leads me to, I think you, I, and Ann Guy talked about this like a year ago. Just like, what is this? Is this like a new withdrawalology? I know you coined that term. Or is it deprescribing science? Or is this a new field? Because if the mainstream is not going to come along, we've given them this opportunity. 30 years of people trying to get off drugs. It's like we're hitting our head against a wall. So it's like this new field is emerging. And one of those one part of that new field is outro. And I want you to talk about outro, but like, what do you think? Is the mainstream going to come along, or does this have to be its own new separate thing?
Well, I think that, one of our old hippie reporters in San Francisco once said, if you don't like the news, make the news yourself. So I think that that's what we have to do. I think that, I don't feel like we have to go and it's like we don't have to like go and ask our like paternal structure to take care of us. Don't we've been asking them, right? We've been asking them politely, we've been asking them,
Mhm.
we've been demanding, we've been screaming, we've been doing all that stuff, and they're not doing that much.
Right.
So so I think that like looking up to like the patriarchy to do the right thing is, the patriarchy is really preoccupied with its other stuff. So if we want to make a change, I think we need to make it. And I think that again, one of the things that's different now is that there's quite a large network of people interested in this subject. Now, I call it withdrawalology because I think that it goes beyond tapering.
Mhm.
But besides, it was fun to make up that word. But
Yeah, it's cool. That's a good word.
yeah, but certainly, tapering is a key element, because the idea is, and I think that that if this is pretty solid, is that if you taper properly, then you don't have the other problems that come along having to do with withdrawalology. So the key to the start is tapering. And I also think that and this is really important, is that if people have a history of going on and off drugs, and their doctors have been switching them from one drug to another, and they've sometimes forgotten to take a dose here and there, and then they get withdrawal symptoms, they're setting themselves up for their nervous systems are every event like that is it's your nervous system has to adapt to it, and it's not endlessly adaptable. It works at it, but you can overtax it. It's and often people do have those histories because the general practice in finding the so-called right drug for you, especially with antidepressants, is to switch you from drug to drug.
Mhm.
So a lot of people do have these histories of having adverse reactions and drug switches and forgotten doses and et cetera, et cetera. And the end result is that, that your nervous system might have, like, I guess you could say, like a bunch of old scars on it. And, and then when you try to go off, it's like, it's not as elastic as it once was.
Right.
So I think that, that like, if people want to try psychiatric drugs, of course, everyone wants to find the miracle drug, that, really bouncing from one drug to another, it's like, it's a game of diminishing returns. So that practice, in my mind, is questionable. So that goes, that becomes part of withdrawalology. We have to like look at, like, what are the antecedents to having difficulty coming off of the drug. Anyway, so outro, and this is something that one would think would have been in the cards for a long time, it's a medical service providing tapering. It's like an online clinic that specializes in tapering off antidepressants at this point. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like a natural outcome that people would do this. And so these fine people up in Canada started this company that's I believe it was a year ago in November that it started. So yeah, so Outro is just getting its getting on its feet. It's a baby company, and currently it's only taking patients in British Columbia and Ontario, Canada. But hopefully it will be able to expand to the United States and other places.
Mhm. To me, it's almost like this is an opportunity to fill a gap where the mainstream is not filling. And we've seen it sprout up, like free range psychiatry, Joseph Wood-During, there is prescribers that are doing this work. And I know they take a lot of risk. My heart goes out to them because I know they're working on the fringes to be disowned by their own. That's the way I see it. Like they might be disowned because they're like, what are you doing? Taking people off, But I think it's a real opportunity. I also think I think I was surprised myself, because I went from running outreach at Medicating Normal to coaching people one-on-one. And the next thing I know, my whole books are full. And I'm like, where do all these people coming from? And I see new people every month. It's like it's a never ending thing. And I might see one person every 6 months. And then I have 5 new people a week. It's like it's never ending,
Yeah, I
And
think that, the demand is, the demand is really nearly infinite because every year more and more people are starting
prescribing, yes.
mostly antidepressants, and after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, they'll want to come off of them.
Yeah.
So it's a continual rolling population. And it's an accumulating population because now there are people who've come to my website who have been on the drugs for 20 or 30 years.
Yes,
Seems
yes.
incredible, but that's so. And it's actually very sad because even according to conventional conservative psychiatric practice, only a minority of people are supposed to be on antidepressants lifelong. For most people, treatment is supposed to be at most a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see a lot of my clients are middle-aged women right when they get to menopause or something about that period of time where they start rethinking about their life. Like, wait a minute, why am I still on Lexapro? Or why am I still taking, it's a lot of middle-aged women. It's kind of it's been shocking to me to see that,
Yes,
Yeah.
actually that, that very population are the people who are seeking help from Outro.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, it's curious that it's middle-aged women, but that's a topic for another discussion.
That's a whole nother hour. Yes. Okay. So I want to hear about your thoughts about the BBC Panorama piece. We were all looking forward to that. What did you think about the final edit?
Well, I had the BBC team. I talked to them. I talked to them twice when I was in England last year, but they weren't filming then. They were gathering background information. They came to visit me in San Francisco and they taped me for a few hours. And then when I went and visited England this last summer, I saw them again. They did some more taping. And I personally only was in there for about 10 seconds. So
that's how it is. That's how it is. The hours and hours, and then it's like a snippet.
I kind of thought that that's how it would work.
Yeah.
How can I say it? It's, first of all, they did an incredibly thorough job researching. They really do. The raw information they gathered covered all of the entire controversy, including the role of the drug companies in promoting and exaggerating the benefits of psychiatric drugs, and also shaping psychiatry. So they gathered all that information, and it seemed as though they boiled it down to a human interest story. So I don't think that it didn't capture everything that was really important, but it was a human interest story. And I think that the PSSD angle, that's post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, it was just becoming prominent at the time that they were wrapping up their production. So maybe, they thought, well, this would be really a good focus because it's very newsworthy and also quite alarming, I think. So I don't know. It wasn't what I expected, but I think that it probably has informed people who were not, who didn't have expectations. I would like to hear what people thought of it.
Yeah.
What their takeaway was. I thought that there was some boilerplate talking heads saying that the drugs are actually good, and I think
Yeah.
that was, that's always, that's like, pro forma for, so that the I hope that the audience knows how to interpret that.
Yes. That's the part that I think I had the trouble with. And I see that everywhere. There'll always be some piece that comes out, The Guardian or the New York Post or something, even Take Your Pill Xanax from Netflix. It's like they say how harmful the drugs are, and then at the last minute it's like, oh, but they work for some people, or they are really helpful. And it's like, okay, but you just showed me all the scary stuff, and that, it just seems like a back talk at the end, but I think patients are smart enough. I don't know.
Well, I think that, I think that like the general public is on to the, like the fair and balanced game.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, and the fact is some people really do like their drugs.
True.
So we do need to allow that. Some
Yeah.
people like them. Some people
Yep.
find some people really believe in them. They think that they're really important to their well-being, and that's great. They want to take those drugs and stay on them, they can do that. I think that,
Yep.
I think that, doctors should also be prepared for the other type of people who really,
There's lots of experiences, right? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of them. I thought my drugs are helping me. They saved my life until they turned on me.
I know everybody does. Everybody does. I thought that the dulling effect of Paxil was very helpful for quite a while, until I found that I was turning into a slug.
Right. Right. Oh, okay. Let's talk about research. This is why I wanted to talk to you the most, I think. I mean, one of the main reasons, but okay, there's all this research coming out that's basically proving what surviving antidepressants says, what patient experiences says. So yes, you need a hyperbolic taper. You need to go slowly. Don't do this like skip a day, take one day, all this. Don't add drugs. There's certain things that we've figured out. And I love the research that's coming out because it's gaining legitimacy. It's helping people understand like what the process should look like. However, in practice, just with the people that at least the people that come to me, it's way more complex than just like a hyperbolic taper. You just go slow and you're fine. And I know you mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of history involved. I always take people's full history. Like, what have you, tell me everything. When was your first psychiatric drug? How did that go? Then what? Okay, how was your last taper? There's so much other things involved. We don't even really know what's going on. But my point here is there's just no guarantee. And so from my perspective, what I've been seeing is people like extremely sick, Adele, and I know you've probably seen them too, like extremely sick. Some of them are stuck on 3 drugs. Some are on 5. Some of them have akathisia at a higher dose, not usually antidepressants, usually benzos, but it's like, I don't think they have the luxury of doing like a slow taper, 1 drug at a time for the next 2 years. So I don't know what to say. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the problem of people taking multiple drugs, that's something that the other many of the doctors who have written in the field of withdrawalology have noted that it's a special difficulty dealing with polypharmacy, and a lot of times, like for instance, the Facebook groups that deal with tapering often send people to my website when their situations are really too complicated for the Facebook groups. So I get a lot of very, very complicated polydrug people. And it's really hard, especially if somebody has been having adverse effects from their cocktail for a long time. Now with benzos are real, boy, those benzos are a problem.
Yes, they are.
Benzos in the mix, you always have to like find out what's going on with the benzo before you can even make a plan. It's because the benzo could be causing all kinds of things. The benzo could be causing symptoms that the person thinks are withdrawal symptoms. The benzo could be causing insomnia. The benzo could be causing paradoxical reactions, interdose withdrawal.
all kinds of things.
Even potentially conflicting with the other drugs and drug interaction. It becomes very messy. So Ange, that on my website, that when people are taking multiple drugs, we ask them to do a drug interaction report.
Yep.
Now, the thing is that the drug interaction report, they're very high level. Those, they're a bunch of free,
drugs.com. Yeah.
Drugs.com is the one that I usually use. And they usually, the results are usually have to do with those liver enzyme conflicts. So, but you look at that stuff and it says, such and such a major interaction, such and such and such and such serotonin syndrome, right? Now, your person does not have evidence of serotonin syndrome, but there's lesser serotonin toxicity that produces symptoms of activation. So when you see that kind of interaction, that, and your person is saying, 3 hours after I take my drug, I get this surge of anxiety and my heart starts beating really hard. That what you have there is like potentially that activation from excessive serotonergic action. So we do a lot in terms of we look at the schedule that the person is taking the drug on. If they're taking 2 drugs at the same time a day, that could increase the risk of a drug interaction. So we ask them to separate their drugs. They separate their drugs, and then we ask them to keep like a diary of their symptoms throughout the day. And it really helps to see once they separate their drugs, which drug is causing an adverse reaction. So that's how you unravel polypharmacy, to see which drug is doing what. With benzos, if somebody is taking too much of a benzo overall, they could have a symptoms activation that they might describe as akathisia. And sometimes dividing the dose will help because it distributes the drug action over a period of time. But sometimes what they really need to do is just to reduce the overall drug burden of that benzo. And it can take a while, but if the benzo is causing this akathisia type reaction as a paradoxical reaction, which is what it is, that that gradual reduction of the benzo should gradually reduce that reaction. So it's really hard because you have to say, we don't want you to get withdrawal symptoms, which could be worse than what you're experiencing now, versus, we would like to do something about your, this drug-induced adverse reaction. So it's always
so, I'm thinking of like 20 cases right now that I have. I'm not kidding you. It's real bad. It's like one person went from a daily micro taper to a cut and hold every 2 weeks because they were like, I can't tell which cut it was that actually is making me worse. I need to see it. Like it's a cut, then a hold, and then a cut. And the first month she did that with akathisia, like she said only 1 day was bad. But now the second month, it's horrible. And it's like, she's so ill, Adele. It's like, she doesn't have 2 years to taper in that state. Like it's not going to happen.
Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about that offline? Because
but I'm just thinking like even okay, so this is a very simplistic view, but I always use this as an example. Like to me, the nervous system is like it wants to stay straight, it wants everything to be easy. You want to sleep, you want to be relaxed, you want to be digesting your food. Any kind of change can do this. To me, it doesn't even matter what drug it is. It's like the nervous system doesn't like it, it's injured, it's done. And there's some patients that they cannot get stability no matter what they do. If they try to updose, if they try to hold, like they're not getting stable. I don't understand it. No, science doesn't understand it.
I think that okay.
That's more of my point. It's just stability. It's stability during a taper. It's hyperbolic taper going perfectly. And I just in my experience as a coach in a year and a half, I have seen more often than not, just patients are so sick by the time they figure this out, or by the time they figure out how to taper correctly. It's stability is not even in the cards, maybe, which I know that doesn't sound hopeful, but they've tried and they cannot find stability.
What I find is that, then again, we should talk more about this, but what I'm finding is that a lot of times people show up and they'll say they'll be tapering and they'll say, I just cannot get stable.
Mhm.
And and often what I'm finding is that there's an adverse reaction in there, that an adverse reaction from the drug in there that they are misinterpreting as a withdrawal symptom. So they're thinking that, that the effect of the drug is
Right.
from a reduction. But it's, each of the situations is
It's so different. It is. It's so
particular,
individual.
and really, I guess you could say that I kind of map it out. I mean, these daily diary, a daily symptom diary has been just absolutely the key to figuring this out.
Okay.
Because if you can identify when the symptoms, let me put it this way, if the symptoms occur regularly at any particular time of day,
Mhm.
that's a relatively easy solution because that's drug induced.
Mhm.
See, the drugs are taken on a regular schedule. If the adverse reaction occurs on a regular schedule, it's related to one of the drugs.
Interesting.
It's not spontaneously coming out of nowhere.
Right.
Now, withdrawal symptoms will be spontaneously coming out of nowhere. So they tend to be much more random.
Mhm.
So that's, that is a tip on how to distinguish the two.
One from the other.
Which is,
But then you might not be able to answer this, but then hypothetically, if a person identifies, I'm having an adverse reaction to this drug at my current dosing schedule, to me, I'm just like, is it really safe to like taper a little quicker to get off of it? Because doesn't that create more instability?
well, yeah, but there's different ways to deal.
Yeah.
Because you could say divide the dose. Like, for instance, lamotrigine, famous for causing adverse reactions at higher doses.
Mhm.
If somebody has taken like 100 milligrams and then shortly after that gets a headache, that's an adverse reaction from the 100 milligrams. But
Right.
if you divide the dose, you can get away with distributing the drug action so that it doesn't cause that adverse reaction, and then you can stabilize and taper. So there's like so many things that can be done. And yeah, I mean, I would really like to
I wish you haven't. We need an article about this.
it's like you and I and the people watching this are the people that know about it now.
I know, right? Yeah, it's bad. I have all these cases flying in my head. Like, I mean, even at like 2 a.m., I got an email that said, help. I know it's 2 a.m., but I'm really desperate. I'm the only one having these kind of symptoms. I'm scared. It's just like there's so much unknown, and it's so hard to help in this community sometimes.
I get that. I get those messages all the time too. It's really, really sad. And and I hate to keep them waiting, but often I can't respond immediately.
Can't answer all of them. Yes. All right, let me see if I got all our questions. I'm looking at my little chart. I think we're pretty close. I don't know. Let's just talk about protracted withdrawal really quick, because I know you went through it. I still am in it. I'm very clear about my process that I feel about 80% healed. I don't feel all the way. So like, what is going on? Like, in your experience, your own theories, all that you've read, all that you've researched, why does it take some of us so long to recover?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Ange, that you are looking great these days.
Thank you.
And obviously, whatever you're doing, it's working. So
thank you.
For you.
Keep doing it. Okay, thank you.
Right. So clearly, clearly you're on your way, and I'm really happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay, so psychotropic drugs modify the nervous system. That's their job. That's the definition. That's why they're called psychotropics. Now, the nervous system isn't just in your brain. It's all over your body. Your nervous system runs your body. And so these drugs go, there's a lot of focus on what they do in the brain, but they're doing stuff everywhere. And when you go off and you have withdrawal symptoms, they can appear anywhere in your body. Some people have gut problems, some people have pain, muscle pain, and then other people will have, you know, what could be construed as psychiatric issues, psychiatric phenomena, even hallucinations.
Mhm.
So it's probably in the brain, but, you know, frankly, I don't know where this stuff comes from, and nobody does. But
No.
okay, so what we're talking about is the system-wide effect. And when you go off of the drugs, everything has to recalibrate, all of it. And it's a very complicated system. So if you, and like, for instance, you were on like a jillion drugs over a long time.
More than 40 in 13 years. Yep.
Yeah, you know, like that has far-reaching effects. It's affected, for instance, your insulin metabolism was affected.
Yes, I still have gut issues. Yes, and a little bit extra cortisol weight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
everything.
so your pancreas is still adjusting.
All these years later.
Well, yeah, of course. It's like, you know, it's like not instant.
I know, it's just so frustrating.
You know,
But
there's this
I
idea,
know.
you know, there's this idea that, like, you know, that it's very mechanical, but you've got it your body works in an extremely complicated network where things are like talking to each other. And there's, you know, it's like they like, let's say, you know, like one system talks to the other system sends the message back and says, you know, my thermostat is at 50%. The second system says, okay, I'm going to send you some, you know, some stimulation. So your thermostat gets up to 60%. And then the other system says,
Yeah.
my thermostat is at 65. It's too much.
Yes.
System comes in and says, I'm going to help you regulate that. Anyway, so all of these conversations have to go on through your entire nervous system, and it takes time to get it, for it to readjust throughout. And that's what's going on with withdrawal. Plus, you've got the process of aging happening at the same time. So it's important, in my opinion, to maintain your health while you're going through this, because your nervous system is part of your body. Your body needs good fuel. Your body needs sleep. Your body needs, you know, good nutrition to fix itself and to operate. So what you want to do is to start pay attention to your health, and just do, you know, do small things, if that's all you can do, to improve your well-being overall, because it's going to take time to fix itself. You know, I don't have the ability to prescribe, and I have no idea. I have not seen any quick fixes with drugs to get all this stuff going. I have not seen, you know, anything that will repair this system-wide problem. Now, I think that Joseph Witt-Doerring is using drugs occasionally for what they call symptomatic relief, meaning if somebody is like in tremendous pain, he'll give them something that's like a painkiller for a while, but he does this really carefully and then tapers them off. And that gets them over the hump, because what happens is that you know, as your nervous system is adjusting and your various body systems are adjusting throughout your body in protracted withdrawal, the symptoms travel around. So, you know, so you might start out with like a tremendous headache for, you know, like 8 months or something. And then, you know, and then that'll fade out, and then you'll go into like, you'll end up with like some gut issues. So it's
I've
like,
seen it.
you know, it's just one damn thing after another. So what you need to do is, you know, you need to figure out like what's the worst thing, and then like do small things that will help you get through that. You need to just rebuild. You need to maintain your body, and you need to maintain your outlook while you're waiting to recover. And this is very much like what people have to do when they have chronic illnesses. It's like, it's one day at a time. You do what you can.
I agree with you. Diet has been important to me. Sunshine, being outside, nature, swim, walk a lot. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to develop diabetes because I could just eat whatever I want, you know, like that's the last thing I need in withdrawal. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of that. All right. So before I let you go, there's a couple questions from the audience. I'm not going to answer a couple of them because they can be found on her website at survivingantidepressants.org. But there's one question here about what countries do you think are the most progressive in regards to psychiatric medications and deprescribing? Like, do you see, from your point of view, what do you think?
Well, it's not the United States. There's in the UK, the advocates have been making some progress in getting the treatment and getting clinical guidelines changed to getting more information about tapering withdrawal into the treatment guidelines. So I guess you could say that that's the most progressive. But it doesn't, I mean, while the guidelines have changed, it doesn't mean the doctors know anything.
It's not translated to clinical practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's going to take, well, in the UK, as I understand it, they, they kind of keep on, they retrain, well, they keep on, they have like continuing medical education for their doctors. So it's going to be a gradual process that the doctors get information or get trained in the updated guidelines.
Yeah, good answer. I see little things, spiking up, like I'm thinking, is that Sweden that has the psychiatric drug-free psych ward? And like Denmark, there's a couple little pockets, but it's not widespread yet and not even close.
Yeah. In the Scandinavian countries are more progressive in the treatment of psychosis.
Right.
So they're experimenting with drug-free, I guess you'd say drug-free supportive environments.
Yeah.
And also the open dialogue movement, which is more like a family therapy kind of approach.
Yep. All right. Well, we're coming to the end. My last question for everyone is always the same. Can you leave us with some hope? Like, what hope do you see in this field or in healing, whatever? How can you leave us with some hope before we hang up?
Well, I have to ask everybody to, first of all patients should should tell their doctors what they're going through, even if their doctor doesn't want to believe it. They just really have to calmly report to their doctor, say, this is what's happening. Don't expect validation from the doctor, but everybody needs to tell their doctors what's happening. And that eventually will get through to the doctors. There are many more patients than there are doctors. And if each one teaches one, we'll make some progress. Another thing is that, again, like over the years, I have seen this information gradually getting into mainstream medicine. It's been slow and there's been a lot of resistance, but it is happening. And I'd say that there are probably more doctors now that are aware that people need to taper than there used to be, but they're still going to be hard to find, but still there are more of them. So you've got to think that if there are more now, probably there'll be more in the future, and fewer people will have problems with withdrawal, I hope. Another thing is that we are seeing some independent entrepreneurs starting withdrawal clinics, and that's a new thing, and that's probably a good thing. So it's possible that let's say larger medical networks will see this and say, yeah, we need to have some of that in our in our systems. So we are seeing progress, but it's I think that change in medicine has always been very slow, and we are just working on it.
There you go. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adele. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all your work in this area. Thank you for doing something that's outside the box, and helping others through your own suffering. I think to me, it's just been, I have to, I can't just walk away from this world and act like it didn't happen. I just can't. That's not how I'm wired. So I just appreciate you for all you've done, and the thousands of people lives you've touched that you'll never meet in real life, but it's got far-reaching effects. It really does. I'm gonna cry. Okay, I'm not gonna cry. Okay, but thank you. To everybody watching, thank you for watching. You can share this video. I hope maybe even your loved ones might watch it, and so they can understand a little bit more of what you're going through. So we'll see you next week. Next week we have Helen Clark. She's a benzo survivor who wrote a book about her experience, and that helped her get through it. So she did something with her suffering too. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adele. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next week.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.